Up front, a Supreme Court bench led by the Chief Justice of India, Chandrachud, has heard the Adani-Hindenburg case today. And India's apex court has observed that the Hindenburg report cannot be treated as, they say, a true state of affairs. What exactly has the Supreme Court said? Let's find out from my colleague Samir Dikshit. He's joining us with the details. Samir, do walk us through what the Supreme Court's observations have been, even as they've reserved judgment in the matter. Samir, you'll need to unmute.
So this was an important hearing, and the judgment has been preserved, but there are certain important remarks that was made by the Supreme Court. But before going into that remark, let me tell you that Solicitor General Tushar Mehta raised a very important point, because during the argument, there were certain sightings of the newspaper which were mentioned, and based on those sightings, the counter argument that was done by Tushar Mehta mentioned that there is a growing tendency of mentioning the news articles which are published outside India to influence the matter here within the country. So that sort of tendency has been indicated by Tushar Mehta. In addition to this, the Supreme Court has clearly said during the proceeding that the Hindenburg report, which has been multiple times raised in the court, it does not contribute to true state of affairs. And that is the reason that now SEBI has been directed to investigate the entire matter, even the market volatility, or even what sort of steps have been taken to protect the interest of the investors. So that was the bold statement that was made by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court also mentioned that is there a need to extend the timeline, and on that particular mark, SEBI has mentioned that they are not asking for an extension of the timeline in the entire investigation or the probe that SEBI is conducting. So no extension or increasing the deadline that has been raised by SEBI. In addition to this, since Prashant Bhushan was counter-arguing in this case, so on the Prashant Bhushan continuous remark that was made that but not every account has been taken into detail by SEBI in terms of investigation. For example, few media clips or the newspapers were cited by Prashant Bhushan. So that was clearly disregarded by Supreme Court, mentioning that that cannot be solely and evident based on which SEBI should take action or issue direction. So that newspaper citing was not encouraged by the Supreme Court. Here I will also like to mention that Supreme Court also barred Prashant Bhushan from reading the Hindenburg report. He was interrupted in between by CGI Chandrachud. SEBI also mentioned that there are no charges against Adani Group in court. So no fresh allegation, no fresh charges, nothing sort of came up in the court, and SEBI made no remarks against the Adani Group in the court. In addition to this, there was an important mark that came up, and Tushar Mehta raised it, that the expert committee that was constituted, the expert committee has not found any, this Adani Group breaching of existing disclosure rules. So whatever the disclosure rules are there, so that has not been breached by Adani Group. So that was also apprised to the court. So based on these things, the matter went on for discussion for more than an hour. And later on, the judgment has been preserved. It is very likely that it will be pronounced next week.
Yes, indeed. But significant questions being raised by the Supreme Court. And let's just decode what the Supreme Court has said in this ongoing matter. This is the Hindenburg Adani row. And of course, to be able to understand what the Supreme Court has said, let's bring in two distinguished lawyers. Sanjay Asher, a senior partner at Crawford, Bayley, and HP Ranina is a Supreme Court lawyer. Great to have you both, gentlemen. Mr. Asher, coming to you first, there has been a slew of petitions that seek an examination of allegations of fraud that were made against the Adani Group of companies in the Hindenburg research report. Now, even as the Supreme Court has reserved its verdict, they've said that SEBI cannot be asked to decide based on media reports. Do tell us, because at one level, it is about the Hindenburg report, and they are saying that this cannot be treated as a true state of affairs, and also the citing of media reports based on the Hindenburg report cannot be something that the SEBI has to go after, is what the Supreme Court has said. How significant is that line taken by the Supreme Court?
It's extremely important And I'm glad that Supreme Court has taken this particular line. Even in my last interview, I had mentioned that, look, anybody can make any allegation, and there is no discipline for the report writers as to what to write and what not to write. By merely making certain allegations, that does not become something which is true and which is correct. So there are a variety of reasons as to why people do make allegations, and the media keeps writing some or the other thing. So the point being that there has to be some discipline in respect of any allegations or any reports which anybody makes on any companies. Otherwise, it creates huge volatility in the market. Retail public, poor investors suffer. And so I'm glad that Supreme Court has made this remark that, look, the media reports and any reports should not be considered in that sense that seriously.
Mr. Ranina, typically court will need evidence for any allegation that is made. As far as the Supreme Court is concerned, from what they are saying, they are indicating that there is no clear evidence that is being offered, and we are just citing media reports. As far as this probe is concerned and what the petitioners have been saying about the probe as well, do put that in context for us.
Thank you, Vikram, for having me. I think the Supreme Court has laid down the correct principle that you can't go by just, suspicions and conjectures and all kinds of media reports. And therefore, SEBI, which is a professional body, should come up with specific allegations of specific findings of fact. And in the absence of SEBI coming up with the specific finding of facts, you cannot rely on these press reports. So while these are only observations made by the Honorable Supreme Court today, I hope it will be reflected in the final judgment, which will be pronounced possibly next week. But this will lay down the correct law. As Sanjay Asher rightly said, we cannot go by these type of media reports. They create confusion, they create panic. They are planted reports sometimes by competitors, by those who want to harass somebody. So media reports have to be completely discounted and cannot be taken into account. SEBI has to come up with a specific finding of fact, and in the absence of any specific finding of facts against the Adani Group, nothing can be done, nothing can be considered to be adverse to that group. So really, we wish that the judgment will come out very, very strongly and very clearly on what are the parameters which SEBI has to consider while coming to certain recommendations and findings of fact.
Mr. Asher, where does this leave the petitioners' argument? They've challenged the probe undertaken by SEBI, and of course, they were stopped in their track. In fact, Prashant Bhushan has been warned by the Supreme Court against making aspersions on the Supreme Court's expert committee members. Mr. Asher.
Yes, Supreme Court, after considering all the facts and circumstances, appointed a committee of absolutely impeccable individuals and who are absolutely expert in the matter. And in spite of appointing absolutely impeccable individuals, I mean, it's very easy to make allegations like this on the Supreme Court or on the formation of a committee. It's absolutely unwarranted. It's completely unprofessional, and it's completely vexatious as well. These are all experts. These are all individuals with very excellent history in their professional career. So one should absolutely refrain from making any such allegations on the committee members. And all of them are highly experienced, highly professionals, and experts in their field.
Mr. Ranina, the SEBI, the market watchdog, has informed us, the Supreme Court today, that it's almost done now with its investigation in the matter. They don't need any time extension. They have clearly given this clean chit, as it were. Does this mean it is the end of the probe now and the investigation?
Well, they said that for 2 accounts of foreign entities, they've still not got the information. So I think they're waiting for that because they belong to some of the tax haven countries and they may not be prepared to give or may drag their feet while giving the information. So I think SEBI will just wait for the time limit, and if the information is not received, they'll come up with their final report. But 98% of the work has been done. And obviously, just for the 2%, they are not going to ask for extension of time. So I think very soon the SEBI will give its final report and the Supreme Court will give its verdict.
Investigation, the probe into these allegations that cropped up in the Hindenburg report, Mr. Asher, as far as how it was conducted and how the Supreme Court has treated the outcome of the probe as well. What do you have to say?
No, I'm glad that Supreme Court has made an excellent probe and brought a discipline on these report writers, on the press media, and on the agencies which make these wild allegations on any of the business houses who are developing the country. So I'm glad that it is under the bench of CJI, and CJI himself will be pronouncing this order. So it's an excellent development, and I'm glad that this has come to an end now, with a positive thing for all business houses as also for the Adani Group.
Indicator as of now, as far as the Supreme Court's line is concerned, we await a verdict now. The case, of course, before the Supreme Court tied to allegations that the Adani Group of companies inflated share prices, and after these allegations were published in the Hindenburg report, it led to that sharp fall in the share value of several Adani Group companies. And earlier this year, the Supreme Court asked SEBI to independently investigate this matter, apart from constituting an expert committee headed by retired Justice A.M. Sapre to look into the matter. And now we seem to be that much closer to a verdict. For your perspective, Sanjay Asher and Mr. Ranina, it's a pleasure having you with us. Thank you indeed for joining us on India Tonight.
Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you.
Now, as